The encyclical letter of the Holy Father Francis on Care for Our Common Home, Chapter 2, The Gospel of Creation, Section 3, The Mystery of the Universe, translated by the Vatican, read by Frank Blissett. In the Judeo-Christian tradition, the word creation has a broader meaning than nature, for it has to do with God's loving plan in which every creature has its own value and significance. Nature is usually seen as a system which can be studied, understood, and controlled, whereas creation can only be understood as a gift from the outstretched hand of the Father of all, and as a reality illuminated by the love which calls us together into universal communion. By the word of the Lord the heavens were made. This tells us that the world came about as the result of a decision, not from chaos or chance, and this exalts it all the more. The creating word expresses a free choice. The universe did not emerge as the result of arbitrary omnipotence, a show of force, or a desire for self-assertion. Creation is of the order of love. God's love is the fundamental moving force in all created things. For you love all things that exist, and detest none of the things that you have made, for you would not have made anything if you had hated it. Every creature is thus the object of the Father's tenderness, who gives it its place in the world. Even the fleeting life of the least of beings is the object of his love, and in its few seconds of existence God enfolds it with his affection. Saint Basil the Great described the Creator as goodness without measure, while Dante Alighieri spoke of the love which moves the sun and the stars. Consequently, we can ascend from created things to the greatness of God and to his loving mercy. At the same time, Judeo-Christian thought demythologizes nature. While continuing to admire its grandeur and immensity, it no longer saw nature as divine. In doing so, it emphasizes all the more our human responsibility for nature. This rediscovery of nature can never be at the cost of the freedom and responsibility of human beings who, as part of the world, have the duty to cultivate their abilities in order to protect it and develop its potential. If we acknowledge the value and the fragility of nature and, at the same time, our God-given abilities, we can finally leave behind the modern myth of unlimited material progress. A fragile world, entrusted by God to human care, challenges us to devise intelligent ways of directing, developing, and limiting our power. In this universe, shaped by open and intercommunicating systems, we can discern countless forms of relationships and participation. This leads us to think of the whole as open to God's transcendence, within which it develops. Faith allows us to interpret the meanings and the mysterious beauty of what is unfolding. We are free to apply our intelligence towards things evolving positively, or towards adding new ills, new causes of suffering, and real setbacks. This is what makes for the excitement and drama of human history, in which freedom, growth, salvation, and love can blossom, or lead towards decadence and mutual destruction. The work of the Church seeks not only to remind everyone of the duty to care for nature, but at the same time, she must above all protect mankind from self-destruction. Yet God, who wishes to work with us and who counts on our cooperation, can also bring good out of the evil we have done. The Holy Spirit can be said to possess an infinite creativity proper to the divine mind, which knows how to loosen the knots of human affairs, including the most complex and inscrutable. Creating a world in need of development, God in some way sought to limit himself in such a way that many of the things we think of as evils, dangers, or sources of suffering are in reality part of the pains of childbirth, which he uses to draw us into the act of cooperation with the Creator. God is intimately present in each being without impinging on the autonomy of his creature, and this gives rise to the rightful autonomy of earthly affairs. His divine presence, which ensures the subsistence and growth of each being, continues the work of creation. The Spirit of God has filled the universe with possibilities, and therefore, from the very heart of things, something new can always emerge. Nature is nothing other than a certain kind of art, namely God's art, impressed upon things, whereby those things are moved to a determined end. It is as if a shipbuilder were able to give timbers the wherewithal to move themselves to take the form of a ship. Human beings, even if we postulate a process of evolution, also possess a uniqueness which cannot be fully explained by the evolution of other open systems. Each of us has his or her own personal identity and is capable of entering into dialogue with others and with God himself. Our capacity to reason, to develop arguments, to be inventive, to interpret reality, and to create art, along with other not yet discovered capacities, are signs of a uniqueness which transcends the spheres of physics and biology. The sheer novelty involved in the emergence of a personal being within a material universe presupposes a direct action of God and a particular call to life and a relationship on the part of a thou who addresses himself to another thou. The biblical accounts of creation invite us to see each human being as a subject who can never be reduced to the status of an object. Yet it would also be mistaken to view other living beings as mere objects subjected to arbitrary human domination. When nature is viewed solely as a source of profit and gain, this has serious consequences for society. This vision of might is right has engendered immense inequality, injustice, and acts of violence against the majority of humanity, since resources end up in the hands of the first comers or the most powerful. The winner takes all. Completely at odds with this model are the ideals of harmony, justice, fraternity, and peace as proposed by Jesus. As he said of the powers of his own age, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great men exercise authority over them. It shall not be so among you, but whoever would be great among you must be your servant." The ultimate destiny of the universe is in the fullness of God, which has already been attained by the risen Christ, the measure of the maturity of all things. Here we can add yet another argument for rejecting every tyrannical and irresponsible domination of human beings over other creatures. The ultimate purpose of other creatures is not to be found in us. Rather, all creatures are moving forward with us and through us towards a common point of arrival, which is God, in that transcendent fullness where the risen Christ embraces and illuminates all things. Human beings endowed with intelligence and love, and drawn by the fullness of Christ, are called to lead all creatures back to their Creator. That was Section 3, The Mystery of the Universe, from Chapter 2, The Gospel of Creation, from the Encyclical Letter of the Holy Father Francis on Care for Our Common Home, translated by the Vatican, read by Frank Blissett.